They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I disagree. I like my revenge served right here, in front of hundreds of people, at the exact moment your enemy thinks he has won. And tonight, I'm ready to serve the feast. He thinks this party is his ascension. He doesn't know it's a trap funded by himself. My name is Alara. From the cantilevered balcony of our Seabrook Point home, the party below looked like a constellation of expensive stars. 200 people, maybe more, mingling on the terrace, their laughter sharp and bright against the dull roar of the Atlantic. The ocean itself was black iron tonight, but our property was lit up, a beacon of success. This was the launch party for Aura Coastal Living, the brand we built from nothing, our brand. Down there, in the center of the swirling light, was my husband, Julian. He was the sun to their planets, the charismatic face of the company. He held a microphone in one hand and a champagne flute in the other, but his right hand never left the waist of Serafina. She was our brand strategist, barely 25 and dressed in a sliver of silver fabric that caught the light and the eyes of every investor. Julian was laughing, leaning in to hear something she whispered, his posture proprietary. He owned the stage. He owned the company. He owned her. I watched them, my own glass untouched. Serafina had been acting as the lady of this house for 6 weeks. My house. She had vetoed the caterer I'd used for 5 years. She'd changed the floral arrangements from my preferred lilies to her sterile architectural orchids. She'd finalized the guest list, adding a dozen influencers I'd never heard of and striking 3 of my oldest contacts. She was rehearsing for the role of my replacement, and Julian was letting her. This party was everything. It wasn't just a celebration, it was a critical professional maneuver. The editors from Architectural Digest were by the fire pit, a team from Forbes was near the bar, and most importantly, the private equity partners who held our expansion capital were clustered near the pool, watching Julian. They were watching the man they trusted with their money. The air was cold, salt spray mixing with expensive perfume. I knew he would come for me eventually. He needed to clear the board before his big move. He found me near the glass railing, overlooking the infinity pool. The water was a sheet of black glass, spilling silently over the edge. Julian didn't bring Serafina. This part of the execution had to be private. "Ilara," he said. His voice was low, intimate. The same voice he'd used when he proposed, the same voice he used to close multi-million-dollar deals. "You're missing your party, Julian," I said, not turning. "We need to talk." He stepped in front of me, blocking the view. His smile was gone, replaced by the tight-lipped expression of a man finalizing a transaction. "So, talk." He glanced back toward the party, ensuring we were out of earshot. "I've filed the papers, Ilara, this morning." He waited for the tears. He waited for the gasp, the accusation. I gave him nothing but silence. The waves crashed below, a soundtrack to the demolition. "The brand," he continued, impatience creeping in. "Aura Coastal. It needs a new image. It needs a younger, more dynamic face. It needs to feel now." I just stared at him. "Serafina," he said, as if it were obvious. "She is that future. She gets it. She understands relevance." He paused, and then delivered the killing blow, the line he'd probably rehearsed. You don't fit anymore. Don't fit." The woman who designed the supply chain, secured the seed funding, and balanced the books that allowed him to play the visionary. "I see," I said. My voice was unnervingly steady. "I want this to be clean," he said, reaching into the breast pocket of his custom Tom Ford suit. He pulled out a thick, manila envelope. "I'm being generous. More than generous." I took it. My fingers didn't shake. I knew it wasn't the divorce papers. His lawyer would serve those. This was something else. I opened the clasp. Inside, I saw the Aura Coastal Living letterhead. It wasn't a divorce settlement. It was a severance agreement, an offer to buy me out of the company I co-founded. I scanned the numbers. It was a joke, a pittance. It was less than 10% of my actual stake. An insulting sum meant to make me go away quietly. He was offering me crumbs from the table I had built. He was looking at his watch, anxious to get back to his audience, back to her. I folded the paper and put it back in the envelope. I looked up, meeting his eyes. He seemed annoyed that I wasn't dissolving. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at this stranger wearing my husband's face. "Julian, are you sure?" I asked. His brow furrowed. The lack of hysterics was clearly not part of his plan. "Am I sure about what it's done, Ilara?" "Is this your final move?" I clarified, my voice as calm as the surface of the pool behind me. "You're offering me this, telling me I don't fit, and putting her on stage. This is the decision you're committing to." He was visibly baffled. He mistook my calm for shock, for weakness. He thought I was broken. He gave a small, arrogant shrug. "This is the future, Ilara. You can accept it, or you can fight it and get nothing. It's your choice." He turned to leave. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an announcement to make." He walked away, leaving me on the dark balcony. He didn't know that I wasn't shocked. I was just waiting. I was waiting for him to confirm his betrayal, to hand me the loaded gun. And he just had... Standing on that balcony, holding his insulting offer, the cold air felt like a slap. But it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the memory of how warm it used to be. We met in business school. It was the most cliché setup, and I fell for it completely. I was the numbers girl, the strategist, the valedictorian. I lived in the library. I saw finance as a language, and I believed the best idea, backed by the best data, would always win. Then there was Julian. Julian was the orator. He was the born salesman, the man who could read a room in 10 seconds and tell them the story they desperately wanted to hear. He never just entered a room. He took possession of it. While I was earning my grades, he was building his legend. He sought me out. He saw my mind not as competition, but as an asset he could leverage. "You're the engine, Ilara," he told me over bad coffee in the campus diner. "I'm just the steering wheel." That night, on a stained paper napkin, I sketched out the concept of Aura Coastal Living. It was my thesis paper, distilled, a lifestyle brand built on sustainable sourcing, timeless design, and a logistics backend that could beat the giants. It was my idea, but he gave it a voice. He looked at my diagrams and saw a billion-dollar story. "My idea, your charisma," I had said, sliding the napkin across the table. "Our empire," he replied, covering my hand with his. I was 26. I had just been offered a junior partnership track at Apex Equity Fund, a position that would have set me for life by 30. It was a 6-figure salary with a guaranteed bonus that was more than my parents made in a year. It was the safe path, the smart path. I tore up the offer letter. I took my signing bonus, cashed out my savings, and poured every cent into our new company. I chose the dream. I chose him. The first 5 years were a blur of 18-hour days and shared takeout containers. We were inseparable. We shared a single, cramped office where the walls were covered in my supply chain maps and his marketing mock-ups. I was the chief operating officer and chief financial officer rolled into one. I negotiated with textile mills in Peru, with shipping conglomerates in Asia, with the banks on Wall Street. I built the complex, invisible machinery that made the company run. He was the public face. He managed the press, charmed the editors, and curated the brand's image. He was brilliant at it. I was happy to be in the background. We were a team. I didn't need the spotlight. I had the balance sheets. I thought that was the real power. When we hit our first-year revenue target, we bought the Seabrook Point house. It was a foreclosure, a wreck of rotten wood and shattered glass. But it had this view. We stood on the bare concrete of this very balcony, and we saw our future. We rebuilt it with our own hands, a symbol of our shared success. I trusted him, absolutely. The initial investors, my contacts from Apex and my professors, they were investing in me. They knew my track record, but I insisted Julian be my equal. I gave him co-founder status, equal shares, and equal operational control. He's the magic, I'm the logic. I would tell them. You can't have one without the other. I tied my success, my finances, and my future inextricably to his. I remember one night in our third year, a massive shipping strike had frozen the port of Los Angeles. Our entire summer collection, 90% of our projected revenue, was sitting in containers on a ship we couldn't access. We were 90 days from total insolvency. The banks were calling. Our retail partners were threatening lawsuits. Julian was pacing the living room, frantic, talking about ruin. I sat at the kitchen island. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I called in every favor I had. I rerouted half the shipment north to Vancouver, had it trucked down, absorbing a 20% margin loss. I had the other half broken down and air freighted, a catastrophic expense. I liquidated a stock portfolio I'd held since college to cover the cost, hiding it from our finance department. I did it to save us. While I was juggling logistics and moving money, Julian was on the phone with Vogue. He spun the disaster into a story of exclusivity, a limited, curated release caused by overwhelming demand. He made our failure sound sexy. When the last box was delivered, when the bank loan was restructured, we collapsed onto the sofa in our office. We were exhausted, but we were alive. He pulled me close, his voice thick with adrenaline and relief. See, he whispered, kissing my hair. It's us against the world, Ilara. We're unbeatable. I believed him. That was the moment I believed we were truly one entity. Thinking back, that was when the self-deception began. As the company grew, I stepped further back. I told myself it was a strategic choice. I was the power behind the throne, the wizard behind the curtain. I didn't need public validation. My value was in the results. It was a lie I told myself. It wasn't a choice. It was an erasure, a slow, subtle removal from the narrative he was building. I wasn't the co-founder anymore. I was Julian's wife. I was the numbers person. I thought staying in the background was a strategy for power. I didn't realize it was just making me easier to delete. The cracks began to show about 18 months ago. It was not a sudden break, but a slow, creeping chill that entered the house and never left. Julian, the man who had built an empire on selling warmth and stability, became obsessed with a single word: relevance. Our growth was steady. We were profitable, respected. We were the brand Forbes called the new standard for coastal luxury. But for Julian, it wasn't enough. We're safe, Ilara, he would say, pacing the deck, staring at the calm evening tide. We're boring. In this market, safe is death. We need to be disruptive. We need to be relevant. His search for relevance began to pull him away. He spent more time in Los Angeles, in New York, attending parties I had no interest in, meeting people who were famous for being famous. He said he was feeling the new energy. Then he hired Serafina. He did not consult me. He did not present it for a board vote, even though it was a major financial commitment. He simply announced it one morning, full of false enthusiasm. Ilara, I've found her, he said, walking into my home office. The one who's going to save us, a complete visionary. Her name is Serafina. She arrived not as an employee, but as a brand consultant. She was young, with that specific curated look of someone who had studied influence, not business. She looked at our financials, the ones I had painstakingly built, with open boredom. The whole vibe is just dated, she'd said in our first meeting, waving a hand at our best-selling product line. It's too comfortable. The urgent business trips started almost immediately. A 3-day trip to Miami to scout a potential pop-up location. A week in Milan for textile innovation. He insisted on going alone. I need to be immersed, Ilara, he argued. I can't be distracted by spreadsheets and logistics. The third time he left, for a creative summit in Ibiza. My younger sister, Chloe, was visiting. She watched him pack, watched the almost giddy energy coming off him. That night, she sat with me in the kitchen, her phone in her hand. "He's lying to you, Ilara," she said, her voice flat. "Chloe, don't. It's work." "Then why," she said, turning the phone to face me, "does his brand consultant keep posting Instagram stories from the exact same hotel pool he's at? Look, that's his watch, on the table next to her drink." There it was. My denial was a physical wall, something I had built brick by brick. His trips, his late nights, his new obsession, they all clicked into place. But I couldn't accept it. Not yet. "It's just work, Chloe," I said, my voice sharp. "You don't understand the pressure he's under. They are working. Stop trying to make trouble." I was defending him. I was making excuses that tasted like ash in my own mouth, lies I didn't even believe myself. She looked at me with such profound pity that I had to leave the room. His phone, the one he used to toss carelessly onto the nightstand, became his fortress. It was suddenly locked with a new Face ID, one that scanned him and only him. When he set it down at dinner, it was always, screen down, a black mirror reflecting nothing. Then came the professional exclusion. It was subtle at first. I'd see a brand strategy task force meeting on the company calendar, but my name wasn't on the invite list. When I confronted him, he was almost paternal in his dismissal. "Ilara, honey, don't worry about it," he said, signing checks without looking up. "This is just the high-level creative stuff, the fun stuff. You don't need to be bogged down with it. You're too valuable on the numbers side." He was sidelining me. He was painting me as the boring, practical one, the no woman, while he and Serafina were the visionaries. I was being demoted in my own company, one creative meeting at a time. The loneliness was suffocating. I felt it most strongly right here, in this house. This monument to our success had become my prison. I would sit in the living room, hearing him and Serafina laughing in his office, the door pointedly closed. I was no longer a partner. I wasn't even a wife. I was an employee, a holdover from a previous administration, waiting to be phased out. The final betrayal, the one that broke through my denial, was the party. It was Julian's idea, announced with fanfare at a board meeting 3 months ago. "The brand feels stale," he declared, his arms wide, his voice full of that old magic. "We need to re-energize. We'll throw the party of the decade. We'll launch a new face, a new energy. We will redefine Oracoastal for the next generation." The board, charmed as always, approved the massive budget. I sat there, taking notes, a cold, sick feeling spreading through my chest. I watched him glance at Serafina, who was sitting at the end of the table. They shared a small, triumphant smile. He turned to me, his face all business. "Ilara, can you handle the logistics on this? All the boring stuff, permits, vendors, staffing. I know you're the only one who can pull it off." I smiled back. "Of course, Julian. Consider it done." I knew, in that instant, exactly what was happening. This wasn't a launch party. It was a replacement. It was his announcement to the world that he was trading in his old life for a new one. And he was making me plan it. He was making me build the stage for my own humiliation. I agreed. But as I walked out of that meeting, the dread was gone, replaced by something cold, sharp, and perfectly clear. That night, after the party was announced, the gnawing anxiety finally solidified into something I could act on. The feeling of being a ghost in my own house, of being managed out of my own life, was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact. Chloe had been right. My denial had been a shield, and it was time to put it down. I waited. I waited until 2 a.m, until the house was still, until the sound of Julian's steady, self-satisfied breathing came from the master bedroom. I did not go for his phone. That was an amateur's move, an act of emotional impulse. His phone held the affair. I knew the affair was just a symptom. The real disease was in the company. My company. I went to my home office, the one Serafina was now using as a creative space. and sat at the desk. I powered on the terminal. I was not just a co-founder, I was the architect of the entire IT infrastructure. Julian had his public-facing access, but I still held the super administrator keys. I was the one who built the server. He wouldn't even know where to look for the real back-end. I logged into the root directory of our cloud server. It was clean. The finance folders were in order. The marketing drives were exactly as they should be. But there was a discrepancy. I checked the total server allocation. There were 500 gigabytes of encrypted data partitioned off, hidden from the main directory. It was cloaked, but not from me. I uncloaked the partition. There it was, a single folder. It was locked, password protected. The folder's name was just 2 words, Aura 2.0. A password. My pulse quickened, just slightly. This was the first hurdle. I thought about him, about his arrogance, his recent obsessions. I tried relevance. Access denied. I tried aura future. Access denied. I tried his birthday, his mother's maiden name. Nothing. I stopped. I thought about his weakness, the core of his betrayal. I typed in 1 word, 1 name, 1 number. Serafina 2025. Access granted. My stomach hollowed out. It was so simple, so pathetic. The password to his new life. The folder opened. It was meticulously organized. Subfolders labeled branding, legal, financials, personal. I clicked branding first. My breath caught. It was a complete, top-to-bottom redesign of Aura Coastal Living. New logos, new color palettes, all the warm, natural tones I had chosen were gone, replaced by harsh blacks and neons. And the brand photography, it was all her. Serafina on the deck of our boat. Serafina on the beach, modeling our new and much cheaper, I noted, swimwear line. Serafina in our living room, draped over the sofa I had custom ordered from Italy. She was not just the brand strategist. He was positioning her as the new founder, the new me. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. It was rage, a cold, clean, precise rage. I clicked on the financials folder. It contained projections, 5-year plans, plans that showed my entire executive salary line allocated to creative development. He was already spending my money. Then, I clicked personal. I should not have, but I had to know the depth of it. It was not just intimate photos. Yes, there were dozens of those, graphic and narcissistic, taken in places I recognized. Our hotel in Paris, the guest room, the shower. But the videos were worse. There was one, they were in our bed, my bed. Serafina was wearing one of my silk robes, the one I loved. They were drinking my favorite wine, the '98 vintage I saved, and they were laughing. Julian was holding the camera, and Serafina was doing an imitation of me. She puffed out her cheeks, pushed imaginary glasses up her nose, and adopted a high, nasal voice. Oh, Julian, we simply must consider the quarterly projections. We can't afford the margin loss if we shift the supply chain. The balance sheets. Julian. The balance sheets. Julian was roaring with laughter, a cruel, ugly sound. That's her exactly. He choked out. God, so boring. So safe. Don't worry, baby, Serafina said, dropping the act and crawling toward the camera. I'll make you relevant again. I'll make you dangerous. I closed the file. I did not get sick. I did not cry. Something in me snapped shut, like a steel trap. The grief was gone, burned away in an instant, leaving only the mechanism. They had filmed this mockery, in my home, on my bed. They had laughed at the very work that gave them the freedom to do so. I thought I had seen the worst of it. I was wrong. The worst betrayal was not the sex. It was not even the mockery. I clicked the last folder, legal. It contained only one file, a single password-protected PDF. I used the same password. It was not a file from our corporate attorneys. It was a scanned memo from a cutthroat boutique divorce firm I had never heard of. The subject line read, "Re-minimizing spousal stake in corporate entity." I read it. I read it twice. It was a detailed, multi-step strategy. It outlined how to use my lack of active engagement in the new creative direction as justification for a buyout. It cited the meetings I hadn't been invited to as refusals to participate. It suggested leveraging my focus on back-end logistics as proof that I was no longer integral to the forward-facing brand vision. It was a legal roadmap to erase me, to argue that the woman who built the company was now just a glorified accountant. It proposed a phased-out equity dissolution based on my waning contribution. He wasn't just planning to divorce me. He was planning to rob me. He was planning to use the very work I did to argue that I was worthless. I sat back, the glow of the monitor lighting my face. The affair was an insult. The mockery was cruel. But this was war. This was my life's work, and he had just handed me his entire battle plan. The legal memo was the final click of the mechanism. The shock was gone. The pain was gone. All that remained was a cold, pure focus. I was no longer a wife. I was a forensic accountant, and I was on home turf. That memo was his strategic plan, but it was flawed. A legal attack on my equity was messy and would take years. Julian was impatient. He was arrogant. He wouldn't just plan to argue my shares away, he would make them worthless. If he was planning to gut the company, he would need capital for his Aura 2.0. He would need money to fund his new life, and he wouldn't earn it. He would steal it. If he was stealing, he would have moved the money. I didn't close the server connection. I went deeper. I left the marketing folders and went straight to the accounts payable ledger, the digital lifeblood of the company. I had built this system. I knew its pulse. I ran a top-level diagnostic, sorting all vendor payments over the last 18 months, from largest to smallest. My eyes scanned the list. Our regular suppliers were all there, the Peruvian mills, the shipping lines, the ad agency. All normal. But then, I saw them. 3 new names, all approved in the last year. Sarah Designs LLC, Coastal Creative Solutions, J.S. Futures Group. I had never heard of them. I checked the vendor approval logs. Julian himself had fast-tracked their approval, bypassing the standard procurement process. The reason listed proprietary creative services. I pulled the invoices. They were laughably vague. Sarah Designs LLC had billed Aura Coastal for $1.5 million for brand strategy consultation. Coastal Creative Solutions had charged $800,000 for market mood boarding. The charges were obscene, the deliverables non-existent. These were not legitimate business expenses. This was theft. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I ran a cross-check on the corporate registration database. All 3 LLCs were registered in Delaware, a ghost state for corporations. But they all listed the same agent, the same anonymous post office box. This was his slush fund. He was systematically billing our company for millions of dollars for services rendered by companies that did not exist, approving the payments himself, and funneling the money out. But where was it going? I traced the bank transfers. The payments from Aura Coastal went to 3 separate domestic accounts at a small community bank. But the money didn't sit there. I initiated a high-level trace, using the access protocols I had built for our corporate auditors. The money was bundled. Within 24 hours of each deposit, it was all wired out. The destination a single numbered account at a private bank in the Cayman Islands. An account held in one name, Julian S. Vaughn. I leaned back, a bitter taste in my mouth. He wasn't just having an affair. He wasn't just planning to dilute my shares. He was actively, methodically embezzling. He was gutting Aura Coastal Living from the inside out, draining its cash reserves to finance his escape with her. This party, this relaunch, it was all a distraction, a smokescreen while he bled us dry. He was going to leave me with a corporate husk, drowning in debt, while he and Serafina sipped champagne on a beach, funded by my life's work. My mind was racing, calculating the total. I cross-referenced the server logs. $4.2 million. $4.2 million he had stolen in just under 18 months. I was about to log off. I had what I needed. But something caught my eye. A flag in the system. The largest transfers, the ones over $500,000, required dual authorization. Our own internal fraud protocol, one that I had designed. Julian could approve the invoices, but he couldn't authorize a wire transfer that large on his own. It needed a second electronic signature from a senior executive. It needed my signature. I pulled up the authorization for the largest payment, a wire for $900,000 to Sarah Designs LLC. There was his digital approval. And right below it, time-stamped 3 minutes later, was mine. Authorized E. Lawson. I stared at the screen. I had never seen this payment. I had never authorized this. I had not been in the office on that date. I was in Chicago, auditing our new warehouse. He had done it. He had forged my electronic signature. The cold focus in my veins turned to ice. This changed everything. This was not just him stealing from the company. This was him framing me for it. He had used my digital credentials to make me a co-conspirator in his own grand larceny. If this all imploded, if an audit ever happened, the evidence would show that I signed off on the biggest thefts. He wasn't just planning to leave me with nothing. He was planning to leave me holding the bag. He was giving himself a getaway plan, and he was building my prison cell. I saved everything. I copied the server logs, the legal memo, the invoices, the wire transfer authorizations with my forged signature. I encrypted the entire package and uploaded it to a secure, anonymous server I held offshore, completely disconnected from Aura Coastal. I powered down the terminal. The house was silent again, save for the sound of the ocean. The game had changed. He thought this was about a divorce. He was wrong. This was a criminal case. And he had just handed the prosecution all the evidence it would ever need. I did not cry. Crying was a luxury, an emotional expense I could not afford. The woman who had been betrayed was gone, replaced by the executive who had just discovered a catastrophic breach. I shut down the terminal, walked out of my office, and went to the guest room, the one room Serafina had not yet contaminated. I sat on the bed and, using my personal cell phone, made a call. It was 3:15 in the morning in New York, but I knew he would answer. The phone rang twice. "Thorne," a voice said, sharp and awake. "Marcus, it's Alara Lawson." A pause. "Alara, this is not a social hour. This must be significant." Marcus Thorne was the most feared and most expensive corporate fraud attorney in New York. He didn't handle divorces. He handled corporate implosions. I had met him once, years ago, when he'd helped Apex Equity Fund dismantle a fraudulent acquisition target. He respected data, and nothing else. "I have a situation," I said, my voice as flat as his. "I am sending a secured, encrypted file to your private server. It contains evidence of systematic, multi-year embezzlement, bank fraud, and a conspiracy to devalue corporate assets, all perpetrated by my husband, Julian Vaughn." "How much?" he asked. He didn't ask if I was sure. He asked how much. $4.2 million that I've found so far, funneled to offshore accounts through 3 shell companies. And the fraud. He forged my electronic signature on multiple wire authorizations to make me a co-conspirator. There was a long silence on the line. I heard the click of a keyboard. "I've received your file," Marcus said. "Give me 1 hour. Do not speak to anyone. Do not touch anything on the company server. Do not, under any circumstances. Let your husband know you are aware. Go to sleep. I will call you at 6 a.m. He hung up. I did not sleep. I sat in the dark and watched the tide recede, the bones of the beach emerging from the water. At precisely 5:59 a.m., my phone vibrated. "Marcus." "He's not just an adulterer. Alara," Marcus said, his voice humming with a predatory energy. "He's a fool. He put the entire plan in writing. He put the mockery on video. He forged your signature. I've seen smarter criminals in traffic court. So, what happens? First, you must understand, Marcus said. This is not a divorce. A divorce is what he wants. A divorce is a negotiation between two parties. This is a criminal case. This is a multi-count federal indictment waiting to happen. You are not a wife petitioning for assets. You are the primary victim and star witness in a massive fraud case. He's planning to announce it all at this party, I said. He's launching her as the new face. The party, Marcus said, and I could hear him smile. Of course, his arrogance is our single greatest weapon. He wants a public coronation. So we move now, I said. We shut him down. No, Marcus replied, his voice firm. We do not. We wait. Right now. You are an aggrieved wife who found a file. If we act now, he will claim it was a misunderstanding, that the legal memo was just spitballing. He will lock down the Cayman account, and we will spend 3 years fighting to get that money back. No, we let him proceed. I don't understand, I said. You want me to let him go through with it. I want you to let him hang himself. He wants a public spectacle. We will give him one. The party is the perfect stage. He will stand up in front of his investors, his partners, and the press, and he will publicly execute his plan. He will humiliate you, and he will announce his Aura 2.0. He will commit the final act, and in that moment, when his betrayal is public and undeniable, we strike. The plan was cold, beautiful, and precise. It was not based on emotion. It was based on legal timing. Here is what we are going to do, Marcus continued, his voice all business. My team is already drafting an emergency petition for an ex parte temporary restraining order and a comprehensive asset freeze. Not just his personal accounts, everything. The shell companies. The Cayman account, we are citing the Patriot Act to freeze it. And most importantly, all corporate accounts for Aura Coastal Living. But if we freeze the company, I started. The payroll, the vendors. The company is the crime scene. Ilara, we have to secure it. Julian's access will be revoked instantly. His corporate cards, Serafina's corporate cards. They will all become useless plastic. The petition will name him Serafina, and all 3 shell LLCs as defendants. Will a judge sign it? I am meeting Judge Kaplan for breakfast in 2 hours. She is a by-the-book judge who despises white-collar criminals, especially ones who forge signatures. The evidence you provided is overwhelming. She will sign the order. It will be sealed. It will not be filed with the court clerk until we are ready. It will sit in my briefcase, a loaded gun, waiting for your signal. And then, he gave me my role. You have 3 weeks until the party. Your job is the hardest one of all. You must do nothing. You must act as the defeated wife. You must be sad, perhaps, distracted, but not angry. You will continue to plan this party. You will approve the caterers. You will discuss the lighting with Serafina. You will smile at your husband. You must give him every bit of rope he needs to build his own gallows. He cannot suspect a thing. If he does, he runs, and the money vanishes. I have to plan his victory party, I said, the words tasting like poison. You are not planning a party. Marcus corrected me. You are planning an execution. You are the architect of his downfall. Now, go and discuss the flower arrangements with your husband. And Ilara, do not lose your nerve. The next 3 weeks were the hardest performance of my life. I became a ghost. I played the part of the defeated wife, the woman who had seen the writing on the wall and no longer had the energy to fight it. I let my shoulders slump. I stopped wearing makeup around the house. When Julian spoke, I would let my gaze drift, as if I were too tired, too lost in my own misery, to follow his grand pronouncements. I was quiet, distracted, and pliable. He lapped it up. My perceived weakness was a drug to his ego. He interpreted my exhaustion as surrender, my silence as acceptance. And as I faded, he and Serafina became more vibrant. His arrogance, already monumental, inflated to grotesque proportions. In our weekly management meetings, the few I was still invited to, he began to publicly pedestal her. As Serafina was pointing out to me, he would boom. Our Q3 projections are irrelevant if the brand feels old. Serafina has her finger on the pulse of what's next. He would turn to her, his smile dripping with a sickening combination of lust and mentorship. Serafina, why don't you walk the team through your vision for the social media integration? She would stand, all youthful confidence and stolen ideas, while I sat at the table I had built, invisible. If I offered a counterpoint, a warning about supply chain stress or budget overruns, Julian would wave a dismissive hand. Alara, please, let's stay out of the weeds. We're talking about vision. He was establishing the narrative for his legal team. I was the past. She was the future. I was the details person. She was the visionary. He was building his case in real time, and I let him. I simply nodded, made a note on my pad, and said nothing. At home, the invasion became literal. 2 weeks before the party, Serafina began moving her things into the Seabrook house. It started small, a yoga mat by the pool, her expensive, clean beauty products cluttering my bathroom counter. Then, one afternoon, I came home to find her standing in the doorway of my home office, my sanctuary. "Oh, Alara, great," she said, her voice bright and dismissive. "I'm so glad you're here. I just can't get any creative flow in the guest room. I'm going to take this space over. It's got the best light, and I really need to be in the center of the house for the party planning. You don't mind, do you?" She didn't wait for an answer. She was already directing 2 men who were carrying in her sleek, white desk. I looked at the boxes marked Sarah's personal. I looked at the woman who was videotaping herself mocking me in my own bed. I smiled, a tired, empty smile. "Of course, Serafina, you're right. The light in here is much better for creative work. I'll just move my things to the study." "Thanks, Alara," she said, already turning away. "You're a lifesaver." I packed my files. I boxed up my awards. And I moved into the small, cramped study by the kitchen, the room we had once designated for a future child. The final test came exactly 1 week before the party. Julian found me in the kitchen, where I was finalizing the catering order. "Alara," he said, dropping a thick stack of documents on the counter. He was in a hurry, already checking his phone. "It's the end of the fiscal quarter. I need you to sign off on these, just the usual annual tax filings for the holding companies." My blood ran cold. I picked up the stack. I didn't recognize the accounting firm on the cover letter, another new vendor. I flipped through the pages. They were not usual tax filings. They were capital transfer declarations. They were documents designed to retroactively legitimize the millions of dollars he had moved into Sarah Designs LLC and Coastal Creative Solutions. They were his attempt to clean the books, to paper over the embezzlement with my signature. He was handing me the murder weapon and asking me to wipe his fingerprints off it. He was watching me, an impatient look on his face. "It's just boilerplate. Alara, I'd do it, but you know how you are with the financials. You always like to have the final say." The condescension was breathtaking. I looked up from the papers, my heart hammering a steady, cold beat. I manufactured a sigh. "More paperwork. Fine, Julian. I'll look them over tonight and sign them. I'll leave them on your desk in the morning." His face relaxed. He'd gotten what he wanted. "Great, thanks. Alara, see, we can still be a team." He patted my shoulder, a gesture one gives to a competent employee, and walked out. I did not sign them. That night, I scanned every single page. I added them to the encrypted file, labeling the folder Exhibit B Attempted Cover-Up. I packaged the original documents, drove to the 24-hour FedEx Center, and sent them overnight to Marcus Thorne's office in New York. The subject line of my email to him was simple: "He's getting sloppy." Adding this to the file. The night before the party. Tonight. The house was finally quiet. The caterers were gone. The string lights were hung. The stage on the beach was set. I was on the balcony, watching the tide, when he found me. "It all looks good," he said, standing beside me. He was wearing his suit for tomorrow, a final fitting. He looked powerful, handsome, and completely hollow. "I'm glad you approve," I said. He was silent for a moment, enjoying the view. His view. "You know, Alara," he said, his voice taking on that familiar tone of false sincerity. "I really appreciate how you've handled all of this. This party. You did a good job. You've been a professional." He turned to me. "It's good that you finally know your place." Know my place. The words hung in the salty air. My place. The woman who built the engine, now being praised for polishing the hubcaps. "I just wanted to make sure the transition was smooth," I said. "And it will be," he said. He reached into his jacket pocket, the one he'd put the severance agreement in just a few days ago. He pulled out a small, white envelope. This one was thinner. "I got you something," he said. "A thank you for your cooperation." I opened it. It was not a check. It was a printout of a flight confirmation, a one-way ticket, first class, to Portland, where my sister Chloe lived. It was scheduled to depart tomorrow, the morning after the party, 10 a.m. I looked at him. "I figured you'd want to get away," he said, a casual shrug. "Go see your sister. Take some time for yourself. A clean break. I'll have your things packed and put in storage by the time you land." He wasn't just divorcing me. He wasn't just robbing me. He wasn't even giving me the dignity of a day. He was throwing me out of my own house, the morning after my public humiliation, with a one-way ticket. He was not even going to let me stay in town to see the ruins. I looked at the ticket. I looked at the man I had built a life with. I smiled, my most broken, defeated smile yet. "Thank you, Julian," I whispered, my voice cracking just right. That's very thoughtful." He smiled, satisfied. He had won. He had erased me completely. "Get some rest, Alara," he said, patting my arm. "Tomorrow is a big day for the brand." He left me on the balcony, the one-way ticket in my hand. He didn't know that I, too, had a gift for him, and it was scheduled for delivery in approximately 24 hours. And now, we are back. Back to the cold balcony, the glass of untouched champagne, the insulting severance agreement clutched in my hand. Julian was watching me, his face a mask of bored impatience, waiting for the predictable explosion of female emotion. He wanted tears. He wanted screams. He wanted me to make a scene so he could have security escort his hysterical wife from his party. I gave him nothing. I just stared, my calmness a weapon he could not comprehend. He laughed, a short, humorless puff of air. "Nothing to say," he sneered. "Finally. That's a first." He looked at his watch, a signal that my time was up. "Look, Alara, take the deal. It's more than you'd get in court." He turned to walk away, to rejoin his adoring crowd. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the sound of the party and the ocean. It stopped him. He turned back, annoyed. "No. What? No. You won't take the deal." I folded the envelope in half, a crisp, precise motion. "No, you're right," I said. "You are absolutely right. It is time for a new image." I let the envelope fall from my hand, a piece of white trash fluttering onto the dark stone of the balcony. I reached into the pocket of my silk dress and pulled out my personal phone. Julian watched me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He saw the screen light up. "Calling your sister for a shoulder to cry on," he mocked. "Or your mother don't bother. My PR team will have a statement out by morning. They'll be hearing my side of it first." He thought I was broken. He thought I was calling for comfort. He gave a final, dismissive shrug and turned his back on me for the last time. He began his confident, arrogant stride toward the glowing white stage set up on the sand, the path lined with cheering guests who parted to let him pass. He was a king walking to his throne. The second his back was turned, I hit the number on my screen. The call connected in a single ring. Thorn. I did not turn to watch my husband's triumphant march. I kept my eyes on the black, churning ocean. Now, I said. I hung up the phone. 200 yards away, beyond the softly lit entrance and the velvet ropes, Marcus Thorne was sitting in the back of a black Suburban. He was not alone. He had a team of 4, including a court-appointed receiver and a digital forensics expert. They had been sitting there for exactly 53 minutes, waiting for that one-word signal. The moment I disconnected, Marcus nodded to his driver. The car pulled up to the security checkpoint. A guard, one of Julian's hired hands, stepped up, clipboard in hand. "Sorry, sir. This is a private event. You're not on the list." Marcus Thorne rolled down his window. He was not a physically imposing man, but his presence felt like a drop in barometric pressure. "We are not here for the party," Marcus said, his voice flat. He handed the guard a thick, court-stamped document. "This is a superior court order, granting us immediate and full access to this property, which is now a secured asset. You have 2 choices. You can accept service of this order on behalf of your client and open the gate, or you can be named as a party in an obstruction of justice complaint. You have 5 seconds." The guard, who was paid to handle drunk influencers, looked at the terrifying, bolded heading, "Emergency Asset Freeze and Restraining Order." He went pale. He fumbled for his radio. "Open the gate, Greg," Marcus advised, reading the man's name tag. "It's the right move." The gate clicked open. The Suburban, followed by a second car, rolled silently up the long, crushed-shell driveway, its headlights off. They were not aiming for the party. They were aiming for the house, for the server room, my old office. I knew, as I stood there, that the first domino had fallen. Down on the sand, the polite jazz music that had been playing all night faded out. A single dramatic spotlight hit the stage. The murmur of the crowd died with the music, replaced by an expectant hush. 200 pairs of eyes, the eyes of investors and editors and the financial press, were all focused on one man, my husband. Julian stepped onto the stage. He radiated confidence. He owned this night. He owned this company. He owned this beach. He picked up the microphone from its stand, the motion smooth, practiced. He tapped it once. "Wow," he said, his voice booming across the terrace, amplified and intimate. He smiled, that billion-dollar smile that had charmed me, charmed our investors, charmed Serafina. "Thank you all for coming," he began. He paused, letting the applause wash over him. Serafina was standing just off stage, looking at him with a gaze of pure reptilian adoration. "Aura coastal living," he continued, his voice dropping into its visionary cadence, "has always been about one thing, the future, about looking forward, not back, about embracing what is new, what is vibrant, what is relevant." He took a breath, building to his grand crescendo. He was enjoying this, the execution of his old life. "And tonight," he said, his smile widening, "I am absolutely thrilled to finally announce that future." He paused, letting the anticipation build, his smile predatory. He reached a hand down to the edge of the stage, toward the shadows. "A future of vibrancy, of relevance, a future I want to share with the true visionary of this brand. Serafina, come up here." She emerged from the side, taking his hand, and practically floated onto the stage. The silver dress clung to her. The spotlight hit them both, a perfectly curated image of new, young power. The crowd applauded, a wave of confused but polite enthusiasm. "This," Julian declared, pulling her to his side, his voice booming, "this is our future." And then, in front of 200 people, in front of our investors and the press, he put his hand on the small of her back, pulled her in, and kissed her. It was not a welcome to the team kiss. It was deep, passionate, and proprietary. It was a public branding. A collective gasp sucked the air from the terrace. People shifted, looking at each other, and then, inevitably, looking for me. I saw the investors near the pool freeze, their glasses halfway to their lips. This was not a launch. It was a deposition. Julian broke the kiss, high on the shock he had created. He kept his arm locked around her waist, her body pressed against his. He looked out over the crowd, his eyes searching, arrogant, until they found me, standing alone on the dark balcony. His smile was triumphant. "And to begin this incredible new era," he said, his voice dripping with a false, theatrical regret. His eyes locked on mine. "I must, unfortunately, say goodbye to the past." He said the words. He made his public declaration. And in that exact instant, the trap sprung. It began as a vibration, a high-pitched electronic buzz. It was coming from the podium. Julian's phone, the one sitting next to his champagne flute, was buzzing violently, skittering across the wood. He ignored it. A technical glitch. But then, a second buzz. Louder. Serafina, who was nestled against his side, flinched. Her small, glittering clutch bag, which she held in her hand, was vibrating as if it were alive. Then another. Across the terrace, near the bar. I saw Julian's chief financial officer, his man, Henderson, pull his phone from his pocket. His face went pale. Another phone buzzed, then another. The entire finance team, Julian's inner circle, all staring at their screens in horror. Julian, his annoyance clear, finally glanced down at his own phone. Marcus had timed the bank alerts to the second. They were simultaneous, coordinated, and absolute. I knew what the email said. I had helped draft the subject line. Official notice account frozen by court order. I started to walk. I left the shadows of the balcony, my refuge. I descended the stone steps, my heels clicking on the slate. A slow, steady, deliberate rhythm. No one was watching me. Not yet. All eyes were on Julian. His smile had not just vanished, it had frozen. It looked like a mask that had cracked. He tapped the screen of his phone. He looked confused. He thought it was a prank, a glitch. He held the microphone loosely in his left hand, his right hand frantically swiping, his knuckles white. He was trying to open his banking app, the one that connected to the Aura Coastal operating accounts, the one that held all our liquid assets. I could see the screen from the steps. A red banner flashed. "Access denied. Contact administrator." He frowned, breathing heavily now. He tried again. "Access denied." A visible ripple of panic crossed his face. This was not in his script. He quickly switched apps, his thumb jabbing the screen, pulling up his personal bank, the one that fed his secret offshore accounts. He logged in. He stared at the screen. He was looking at his life's savings, the $4.2 million he had stolen. Balance 0.0. And beneath it, in bright red letters, account frozen pending judicial review. He was suffocating, right there on stage. He tried his American Express app. Account suspended. Beside him, Serafina was having her own realization. Her face, moments ago flushed with triumph, was now a sickly white. She was frantically tapping at her own phone, her painted nails clicking. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to book an Uber, an escape. She was using the company Amex Black Card, the one Julian had given her, the one she'd used to buy her silver dress, her new life. Payment declined. She tried again. Declined. The getaway car was not coming. I had reached the edge of the stage. The crowd was dead silent, a terrible, thrilling vacuum of an absence. They could feel the disaster, but they did not understand its shape. They just saw their golden host, frozen, staring at his phone, the celebration dead in the air. I walked up the small side steps. Julian looked up from his phone, his eyes wild, uncomprehending. He saw me. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. I walked calmly to the second microphone, the one that was set up for a Q&A session. I picked it up from its stand. I tapped it lightly. It was live. The small thump made Julian flinch, as if he'd been shot. "Sorry to interrupt. Julian, I said. My voice was amplified. It was calm. It was clear. It echoed across the entire beach, cutting through the sound of the waves. It was a lovely speech. Really, I said. I turned for a moment to look at the stunned crowd, the investors, the Forbes reporter who was now recording the entire scene with his phone. But I'm afraid you can't start your future without any money. Julian stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out. Ilara, he finally choked out. Ilara, what is this? What did you do? Me, I asked, feigning surprise. I didn't do anything. Julian, you did. I turned back to the crowd. There seems to be a slight change of plans tonight. Julian is right. He is saying goodbye to the past, but he's made a small mistake in the timeline. I took one step closer to him, to this man who was visibly trembling. You see, Julian, you're mistaken. I'm not fired. I'm not being replaced. I looked him dead in the eye. You, I said, my voice dropping, but the microphone catching every single syllable, are under investigation for embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, and federal bank fraud. The crowd was a sea of stunned faces. This was not the party they had signed up for. This was a public execution. Julian was so excited to tell you about the future, I said, my voice projecting with perfect clarity. So let me give you the details he left out. For the last 18 months, my husband has been systematically embezzling from the company we built together. A collective, horrified gasp. The investors near the pool took a visible step forward. I'm sure you're all wondering where the $4.2 million went. I continued. It was laundered through 3 shell companies. Sarah Designs LLC, Coastal Creative Solutions. I let the names hang in the air. Then, I turned and pointed one, steady finger directly at Serafina, who looked like she was about to be physically ill all over the stage. Companies registered in the name of his mistress, her apartment, her new car, that silver dress she's wearing. Every last thread was paid for with stolen money. Your money, I said, nodding toward the investors. Our money. That was the spark. The cluster of venture capitalists, men who had been smiling and drinking Julian's champagne, instantly transformed. Their faces went from confusion to cold, reptilian fury. This was no longer a party. It was a crime scene, and they were the victims. This is an outrage, one of them shouted from the crowd. Julian, finally snapping out of his paralysis, lunged for his microphone. He was white-hot with panic. She's lying. She's hysterical. This is slander. She's a vindictive, scorned wife. You can't prove any of it. He was shouting, his voice cracking, the charismatic mask shattering into 1,000 pieces. I waited for him to finish. I didn't even raise my voice. I don't have to prove it, Julian, I said softly into the microphone. I already did. I presented the evidence to a judge this morning. The wire transfers, the bank statements, the forged signatures, my forged signature. I let that sink in. The crowd murmured, the word forged spreading like fire. The court, I continued, found the evidence so compelling that a judge signed an emergency order. That's why your phones are buzzing. Julian, that is why your accounts are empty. Because as of 9:02 p.m., exactly 3 minutes ago, every single asset associated with your name, her name, the shell companies, and Aura Coastal Living has been frozen by the United States judiciary. I took a step toward him. He stumbled back. Everything, I repeated, letting the word slice through him. Every dollar, every stock, every share, including the account in the Caymans. If he had been pale before, he was translucent now. The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he would collapse. The Cayman account. That was the final, fatal blow. The one he thought no one could ever find. He knew, in that moment, that he was utterly, completely, and irrevocably finished. As if on cue, the crowd at the back of the terrace parted. It was not security. It was Marcus Thorne, flanked by two men in dark suits who were built like refrigerators. They were not party guests. They were lawyers, and they looked like undertakers. They walked directly to the stage, ignoring the gasps, and stopped at the bottom, looking up at Julian. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He simply held up the thick, blue-backed legal document. "Julian Vaughn," he stated, his voice carrying in the dead silence. "You have been served." One of his associates mounted the steps and placed the thick packet of papers directly into Julian's trembling, unresisting hand. Serafina saw her opening. While all eyes were on Julian and the lawyers, she bolted. She kicked off her silver heels and made a desperate sprint off the side of the stage, scrambling onto the sand, heading for the darkness of the dunes. She didn't get 10 feet. "Ms. Serafina Dubois," Marcus called out, his voice bored. She froze, but didn't turn around. "I wouldn't do that. You are a named defendant in this action. Your assets, including that declined credit card, are also frozen. If you attempt to flee, we will simply have you arrested. Stay where you are." She stopped, a pathetic, glittering figure, barefoot in the cold sand, her escape route gone. She slowly, agonizingly, turned around. I looked back at my husband. He was standing on the stage he had built for his triumph. Under the spotlight he had so desperately craved. He was ruined, publicly and professionally, in front of every single person he had ever tried to impress. He was staring at the legal order, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief and horror. He was a king in a kingdom that had just evaporated. The show was over. I walked over to him. He was breathing in short, shallow gasps. He didn't even see me approach. I reached into the pocket of my dress and pulled out the one-way plane ticket he had given me just last night. The thoughtful gift. My banishment. I held it out to him. He stared at it, confused. "You'll be needing this more than I will," I said, my voice low, just for him. I placed it on top of the court order in his shaking hand. "Although," I added, "I'm not entirely sure they accept these where you're going." I turned away from him. I left him on that stage, in the ruins of his new life, surrounded by the wreckage of his arrogance. I stepped down onto the cool grass, my work finished. I walked past the stunned investors. I walked past Marcus, who was already on the phone with the district attorney's office. I kept walking, not looking back, as the party I had planned dissolved into a full-scale legal investigation. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. Remember to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.